right, so we're now recording. Welcome to 2019. We're excited. We have a full lineup this year. Great topics with lots of diverse topics. We will be recording, and you can see all the archived presentations and webinars at this blue link here, extension.umd.edu/women in ag, as well as what we have upcoming in 2019. A quick reminder, we have a regional conference that's coming up. More information is located on that website with the conference as well as Annie's project. Finally, also would like to thank our sponsors as well as collaborators for the Women in Ag program. So thank you very much for all their support. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the presentation over to Paul and Howard, and they will be our presenter for today, talking about the Farm Bill, very timely topic right now. So Paul, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, and I think I'm working on sharing the screen. Can you guys see the screen?
Looks good.
And if I do this, does it still work?
Yes, looks nice. And anybody that has any questions, feel free to use the chat pod. And Paul, I can help facilitate the questions.
Right, and I'll hand it over to Howard, and he's going to get us started.
Great.
Good morning. This is Howard Leathers. I can identify my voice. And Happy New Year. We're going to talk today about especially the parts of the 2018 Farm Bill that deal with farmers. There we go. This is the among the people that support my efforts and Paul's, our department here at the university, the Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics, Maryland Extension, obviously, and USDA. So this is a little pie chart showing you how USDA is planning to spend money over the next 10 years. Based on the provisions in the 2018 Farm Bill. You can see that big blue area is, of course, nutrition programs, primarily the SNAP program. And what I'm going to talk about, I think what Paul is going to talk about, is mostly the yellow and the red slices here, the commodity programs, and briefly the crop insurance programs.
Oh, I think we have a question. Something Shannon just said. We need to do something?
No, I'm just chatting with the participants. If they want to increase their view, they can go to view and change their screen. So, yeah.
No. So I guess unlike the last Farm Bill, which was filled with drama and postponements and temporary kicking things down the road for a while, this Farm Bill process got started pretty normally, and it really did look promising, although it did come up past the true deadline, which was September 30th, and only got final approval in December. Nevertheless, it was lacking a lot of the drama. And the kind of things I'm going to talk about today, you'll see there's not a lot of drama in there either. So unlike the 2014-2015 time period when those of us in Extension were running around to farm meetings in the state talking about new unfamiliar programs and introducing farmers to the new provisions. This year's Farm Bill, this 2018 Farm Bill, has a whole lot of familiarity. It has strong similarity to the 2014 provisions. So for the commodity programs, just as in the 2014 provisions, a farmer chooses crop by crop between one of two programs, the price loss coverage program and the county agricultural risk coverage. And for those are commonly referred to as PLC and county ARC or ARC-CO, and that's how I will refer to them today. The 2014 Farm Bill had another option called the Individual ARC program. Almost no farmers opted for that, and that option has been discontinued in the 2018 Farm Bill. The payments for both of these programs are based on base acres in each crop, not actual current production acres. The base acres reflect the land use patterns on the farm in a historical period, depending on how recently it's been updated, but not current production patterns. And just a quick reminder of how these two programs work. The PLC has the word price in it, and it makes a payment per bushel when national crop prices fall below a trigger level known as the reference price. Per acre payments will differ from farm to farm based on the program yields for the individual farm. So you could have neighboring farms receiving different per acre payments, but they would be receiving the same per bushel payments. The County ARC program makes a payment per acre. I see I said per bushel, that's a mistake. Makes a payment per acre when the average per acre revenue in the county for the crop falls below a trigger level. So in cases like this, two farms in the same county would receive the same per acre payment when such a payment is triggered. There was a difference of opinion between the House version and Senate version, and the version and I believe it was the House version made the PLC program relatively more attractive compared to the old Farm Bill, and the Senate program made the County ARC program a little more attractive. In the final version, it was the PLC program that became more attractive, and the County ARC program remains essentially unchanged. So there are two differences that make the PLC program more attractive than it was under the previous Farm Bill. The first change is that in the 2014 Farm Bill, the statute itself established a reference price, that is to say a trigger price for triggering payments, and that price level existed for all of the 5 years under the Farm Bill, was unchanged. Those same reference prices are included in the legislation for the 2018 Farm Bill, but there is a provision that would allow, under some circumstances, the possibility that reference prices will increase. So I'll talk about that in a little more detail in the next slide. The second change that makes the PLC program more attractive under the new Farm Bill than it was under the old Farm Bill is that there is a provision that allows farmers to update their program yields based on recent on-farm performance. This is voluntary and therefore can only increase program yields and therefore can only increase PLC payments per base acre. And I'll talk about that in just a minute too. The upward adjustment in the reference price works like this. To begin with, the so-called statutory level of the reference prices are the same. So corn is a big crop in Maryland, and that's a number that I've said so much I have memorized. $3.70 a bushel, the reference price for corn. Meaning, if the national price for corn falls below $3.70, a PLC payment is triggered. Under the 2018 Farm Bill, if market prices stay enough above the statutory reference prices, then that can cause a calculation of something called the effective reference price, which is above the statutory price. So the effective reference price is calculated as 85% of the Olympic average national price for the previous 5 years. Well, that's a mouthful, but but I'll give an example on the next slide that I think will clarify this. And under no circumstances, no matter how high the prices go, can the reference price ever increase by more than 15% from the 370 level. So here is an example which obviously the 2017 and 2018 prices are actual prices, but I just made up numbers for the next 3 years, and you can tell they're much higher in order to illustrate how a revision in the effective reference price might occur. With this price history, prices going to 470, 530, and 520 in the out years, the Olympic average over these 5 years is 450. So just a reminder, we dropped the low, which is 336. We dropped the high, which is 530, and we averaged the other three. So that brings us to 450. Then we take 85% of that number. It's $3.82. That's above 370. So the effective reference price for corn, if this should occur for 2022, would rise from 370 to 382. And 382 is less than 115%, so that 15% maximum constraint is not binding. So this is one way that the 2018 Farm Bill makes the PLC program slightly more desirable. It has the possibility of a rising reference price should national prices for the commodity in question rise. You can tell by a significant amount in the case of corn and for an extended period. The updated program yield is calculated as follows. We take this is also a bit complicated, but in practice not as complicated as it is to describe in words. You calculate the average yields for the crop on your farm for the 5 years 2013 to 2017. Those are the 5 years prior to the 2018 Farm Bill. You multiply the result in step 1 by 90%. Then you multiply by the result in step 2 by an additional factor, which is between 90% and 100%. And that depends on whether national yields have grown by a lot or a little. If national yields have grown by a lot, as they have for corn, then the 90% figure is what's effective. If national yields have grown, have shrunken or not grown at all, as in the case of wheat, then the 100% factor is used here. And then what an individual farmer would do is compare the result in step 3 to existing program yields, and if that result is higher, you would take the option to update. And I think farmers should do this even if they're saying, well, I'm not going to use the PLC, so my program yields don't matter, because I think this will become baked in the cake for future farm bills. So here's an example. We have a current program yield for corn on a farm of 142 bushels an acre. We have average yields for the 2013 to 17 5-year period of 165. We take the 165 and multiply it by 90% in step 2, and then another 90% in step 3, and we arrive at 134. 134 is lower than 142, so for this farmer, it doesn't pay to update. Then I have just a couple slides here touching on minor points in the Farm Bill. The loan rates under the Marketing Loan Deficiency Payment Program were increased modestly by 13 to 15% depending on the crop, but for every crop, those loan rates appear to stay far below the levels expected for market prices. So here's a couple examples relevant to Maryland farmers. The corn loan rate increases from $1.95 to $2.20, but corn is currently priced at $3.80. It hasn't been below $3 in 10 years. So the trigger for loan deficiency payments hasn't been effective for corn, and it doesn't look by most projections to be anywhere close to being triggered. Likewise, for soybeans, the loan rate increased from $5 to $6.20, but soybeans are currently priced at over $9, and they haven't fallen below $8 in 10 years. So I don't think although people will talk about the increase in the marketing loan rates, I don't think they're likely to really have much practical difference. There is one important change that I want to make sure to emphasize, and that is under the 2014 Farm Bill, a farmer had to make a decision in early 2015 for the life of the Farm Bill about which program would be in place for which crop. So a farmer would say, I'm going to put corn in the County ARC program, and I'm going to put barley in the PLC program. Now, whatever crops the farmer had base acres for, the farmer would make a choice of which program for those crops, and then that would be effective for the 5-year life of the program. Under the 2018 Farm Bill, that commitment is not for the full 5 years, but only for the first 2 years, and then can be revisited in the year 2020. So that also gives farmers a little bit more flexibility. Farmers who opted for say, County ARC and were then disappointed that they hadn't chosen a PLC when corn prices dropped, now they at least have some ability to revisit. Of course, you can't revisit it retroactively, but looking forward. And then there are some rather small print changes in how base acre calculations will be done for farmers who planted those acres in grass or pasture. And if you've received a notification or been concerned about that, I recommend you just see your local FSA office if you think this applies to you. So there was, during the course of the debate on the Farm Bill, a lot of debate and apparently debate so rancorous it threatened the passage of the Farm Bill about work requirements under the SNAP or food stamp program, and secondly about payment limitations for farmers. Senator Chuck Grassley has been a longtime leader. He actually is a farmer himself, and so his opinions are taken quite seriously among his colleagues. And for even going back to the 2014 Farm Bill, he has been promoting changes that would restrict the ability of farmers to add family members and other people who to add them as actively engaged in operation of the farm in order to circumvent the payment limitations. Just a reminder, the 2014 Farm Bill had limitations of $125,000 for a farmer, plus an automatic $125,000 for a spouse. And so for any married farmer, the effective limit was $250,000. But farmers who appeared to be in danger of reaching this limit found they could add people to the farm management team structure if they had certain financial organization legalities in place, and if they made attestations about the active participation of this. So that was used in some cases to add nieces and nephews involved in farm operations. So, you know, I followed this all, and at some point I realized that I'd be interested to know how much this might affect farmers in Maryland. So I just sat down and did a simple calculation. What about a corn farm with base acres, with program yields of 150 bushels an acre, and suppose that the corn price fell to $3.20, so 50 cents below the reference price. How many acres, how many base acres would that corn farm have to begin to bump up against the $250,000 limitation? And the answer is 4,000 base acres. So I can't claim to know the details of every farm in Maryland, but I don't think we have that many 4,000 acre corn farms. And my colleague Paul reminded me that this is mostly effective for the rice farmers in the South. Yeah. So at any rate, that's in there. You'll perhaps if you followed the debate in agricultural press, you've heard this discussion, and incidentally, Chuck Grassley's desire to limit this lost. It wasn't, no changes were made in the limitations in the 2018 Farm Bill. I want to take a few minutes to talk about the dairy provisions in the 2018 Farm Bill. There's, I hope, not very much potential for confusion, because the big changes in the dairy programs were made not in the 2018 Farm Bill, but in the bipartisan Budget Act, which was passed in January or February of 2018. And those changes were then folded into the Farm Bill later in the year. The big lessons here is there's a need for very large dairy farms, those with herds of more than 200 cows, to look into this in more detail. For smaller farms, there's a new version of the old margin protection program. It has a new name, the Dairy Risk Management Program. And those of you who've watched the dairy industry over the last few years realize how upset dairy farmers were with the effectiveness of the dairy safety net, because the margin protection program, which had a basic $4 margin coverage, was never triggered a payment at all during the entire 5 years. And so farmers, I think, with some legitimacy, felt that that program had been set up in a too conservative a way. Now, the old 2014 Farm Bill program did allow farmers to buy up margin coverage from $4 to $4.50 to $5, all the way up to $8, but required those farmers to pay a premium. So the 2018 Farm Bill makes those premiums much lower, especially for the first 5 million pounds. And that's what leads me to the approximately 200 cow guidance. And on average production will be a little bit above 200, but if you're at the 200 cow level, that's probably reason enough for you to want to take a close look here. So for the smaller farms, the 2018 Farm Bill makes it very attractive to buy up coverage, probably to the maximum. And I'll show some slides on that in just a minute. And for larger farms, you are now allowed under the 2018 Farm Bill to combine the Dairy Risk Management Program payments for your first 5 million pounds with an insurance margin protection program for production above 5 million. The 2014 Farm Bill forbade farmers from using both of the programs, and that restriction's been eliminated. So for small farmers buying up to a maximum, it looks like a good decision, and here's the reason. You see this little red line shows the buy-up premiums for moving from the 4 level where the premium is 0, moving on up to 450, and you can see we get the 2014 Farm Bill maxed out here at $8 and charged for that sort of buy-up a premium of 47.5 cents per hundredweight, and this one here is the 2018 Farm Bill allows buy-ups all the way to $9.50. The comparable number to that $47.50 is 10 cents, and it doesn't rise very much as you go from 10 to $8 at 10 to $8 at 10 cent premium, $8.50 at a 10.5 cent, $9 at 11 cent, and then you do get a slight bump here at $9.50 up to 15. But all of these premium levels are much, much lower than they were, and very close to the free and the low levels of buy-up. So once you get started on the buy-up route, it doesn't seem to be much more expensive to buy up to the larger amounts. And again, those are restricted, these premiums are restricted only to the first 5 million pounds. Here's $9.50 drawn on the actual margins going back to 2000. You can see here's the $4 range where for the planners of the 2014 Farm Bill, it looked like margins did fall below $4. But for the actual operation of the 2014 Farm Bill, they never even came close. So this reflects why farmers were now. I've drawn in this $9.50 line so that you can see how frequently and how by what amount margins have fallen below the $9.50 amount. So again, I think this is something for farmers to think about in terms of buying up that coverage to the maximum. Now, for farmers who have production of more than 5 million, you can buy the coverage. You can buy the buy-up coverage for the first 5 billion with the premiums I showed below. But for anything above that, there's a much higher premium structure. So you can see for the $8 premium that had in Tier 1 for $5 million and less, a 10-cent premium. Here it's, I pointed to the wrong one. It's $1.81 for amounts above that. So I think this is probably intended to discourage large dairy farms from taking a lot of buy-up coverage. But to offset that in part, large farms can follow the small farm strategy for the first 5 million and then switch to a margin insurance product. There are two things that might make crop insurance attractive. Under the old Farm Bill, there was a nationwide limit on premium subsidies for livestock insurance. So it did happen probably, I hope not to anybody listening, that a farmer would say, oh yeah, I want to get some of that livestock insurance, and would go to their insurance agent and discover that there was no premium available. So the farmer was responsible for the full premium load. That provision was eliminated in 2018 so that all farmers who have an interest in this should be able to buy the crop insurance for dairy margins and receive the approved premium. And then in addition, a new type of insurance has been developed that give dairy farmers an alternative to LGM dairy. I'm not going to describe that here, but we may have other opportunities to do that, and certainly your crop insurance agent will know about that. I'm nearing the end, I think, of what I need to say. What about crop insurance in the 2018 Farm Bill? I wrote this slide a couple days ago and led off with the statement, farmers will not see any immediate changes in crop insurance under the 2018 Farm Bill. Since then, I have learned about one small change, and that is, it's not in my notes and I can't see it here. That is the, it may come to me in just a minute, so let me not hem and haw here for too long. Oh, it has to do with enterprise structure. Under the old Farm Bill, if you had sort of multiple farms within a county, whether you own them or were share renting those, you could combine them for insurance purposes into a single farm called an enterprise unit. But if you had an enterprise unit in one county and you had land that you were farming in an adjacent county, you couldn't include that in your enterprise unit. Under a rule just adopted by RMA, you can now add farmland in adjacent counties to the enterprise unit you have in the next door county. But other than that, I don't think that farmers will see many immediate changes. Over the years, we've talked to people in the crop insurance industry and also in Maryland agriculture as a whole, and heard a number of suggestions and complaints, or suggestions maybe I should say, about ways that crop insurance could be more helpful, especially new products. If RMA would approve insurance for new products, such as hops. I see I've neglected to complete that sentence. But also for the usability of whole farm insurance. So these are directed. These are addressed in the 2018 Farm Bill, and RMA is directed to study and to, I think it's required to come up with new crop insurance products every year. So they're sending the message to RMA, don't just sit on the status quo, be more aggressive about finding new crop needs and new uncovered counties for existing crops and make those available. And especially the whole farm crop insurance is in the Farm Bill, sort of under the heading of encouraging local food. So I think especially the problems that have been, or the issues that have been raised on the East Coast and other parts of the U.S. with the whole farm has been among farmers who have a widely diversified fruit and vegetable portfolio that they are selling partly to farmers markets and partly to local stores and partly to larger agribusiness companies, and they found just some impediments of using whole farm insurance in those circumstances. So RMA is instructed to think about that and study it and think about what changes might make it more suitable. And now I turn things over to Paul Geringer.
Okay. So I'm only going to talk about one aspect of the Farm Bill, because this is the thing I get the most questions on, and you can guess from my title. Can you grow hemp right now? I'm going to point out, if any of you are, and I can't see who's all on the webinar right now, but if any of you are in Delaware and saw a news story earlier, maybe late last week, early this week, that said it's now legal to grow hemp in Delaware, I'm about to bust your bubble. It's not legal to grow hemp really anywhere unless it's a part of still the research projects. There's still a lot of things that have to get done before it technically is legal. So Howard already covered all this, so I'll skip all that. and do my quick overview. So the big thing it does is it declassifies it as a Schedule I narcotic. It is as long as the cannabis plant that would be hemp has less than 0.3% THC by dry matter weight, it is no longer a Schedule I drug. Anything over 0.3% is considered marijuana. So for that most part, it's no longer going to be classified as a drug. It doesn't mean it's legal to grow right now, as we're going to talk about. Mainly, we need USDA to figure out what an approved hemp production plan is for either the states or in states that don't have the resources to do this, how USDA is going to set up a federal program for those states, and we really can't do that right now because the government's close, so we're still waiting on some of those issues to be resolved. Until that's done, states really can't legally authorize producers to grow hemp. I put Sonny Perdue up there because it says the secretary will approve these plans in the law, which probably means somebody at AMS will end up approving them. All of this will now flow under ag marketing services for the most part. So if you've been involved with specialty crops and dealt with ag marketing service, this is the group you will be dealing with hemp production as well. This hemp production plan, that's kind of the key to this whole thing, is this way that we're going to monitor producers and how we're going to regulate production. Again, we're only deregulating anything 0.3% THC. We still have to regulate, the marijuana out there. So state departments of ag will submit this plan for approval to USDA. It's got to include certain things in it. There's got to be a system to record where land is produced. This stuff looks like marijuana when it's growing, so the cops and everybody else would like to know where the legal fields of hemp are growing and where the illegal pot fields are growing. It will make their lives easier. We have to have testing procedures and all of this. It's all based around the THC level, so you have to go in and test this stuff periodically. The test over, there's got to be destruction procedures as to how this stuff will be either destroyed by fire or some other way, which will just wipe it off the planet. How is the state going to enforce this? How is the state going to do random samples each year of growers to sample stuff? It's not just going to rely on you to turn in test results. It's going to rely on the states to go out and do random samples. All this information has to be conveyed to USDA in some way. I'm assuming in some cases there's going to have to be ways to put this in so it's not FOIA acceptable, so it's not available under Freedom of Information Act, because we probably don't want some of this information out there in the general public. Similar with nutrient management plans and stuff like that in the states, there's still areas there. And then the state's going to have to be able to certify to USDA that they have the personnel and the resources necessary to carry out this plan. So some states may not actually have the resources to do that depending on state budgets, and we'll have to rely on the second thing that I will talk about when this comes about. Once this is done, then the state will be able to take growers in and be able to figure out how these things should be grown, and any grower that complies with it will legally be able to grow with it. The other issues that are going to pop up with, I was talking to a faculty member at University of Kentucky yesterday on the phone, and he had questions on hemp production contracts, because a lot of growers in the research program that the state of Kentucky has set up under the last Farm Bill allowed research programs. This one's deregulating it totally. Their growers are growing it for processors for CBD oil in California, and the California processors are contracting with Kentucky growers to grow it. So there's some concerns as to how these contracts should be set up. So we may see a lot of that being done too with the price of CBD oil currently, and I can't remember what that price is by pound. Currently, we're waiting on USDA to develop the regs for what a hemp production plan should look like and what format they want it in, all that fun stuff that comes with new farm bills. I've seen stuff that says we should assume it's going to take about 12 months for all this to get approved. I'm saying 12 to 18 months. And just to make that clear, that's 12 to 18 months from when the government reopens, whenever that is. So you cannot mark down that it's 12 months from today, this will be totally done. It is seriously probably going to be 12 to 18 months from whenever the federal government reopens to when we'll start seeing these approved plans and producers start growing this stuff. It sounds like, at least if you're in Maryland, the state's going to go ahead with a pilot program for research. So producers will be able to start growing as a part of the pilot research program. Once those regs come out, those are supposed to come out in a couple weeks. So will be ways to do this, but other states that haven't done the pilot research programs will still be waiting 12 to 18 months and then maybe 24 months, depending on when the plans hit. So what happens if we don't have the resources to carry this out? How do we go about developing a hemp production plan? Because the state may still declassify it as a controlled substance and want producers to grow it, but they may not have the resources to do it. USDA, under the law, can come in and create their one in those cases. Any plan they create, if you look at the 7 or 8 things I said that had to be in there, their plan has to have the same things in it. So it has to be able to record the land, test it, destroy it, do all that. So the USDA cannot create a minimum. So what we may see is just in states where there have been budget crises and they don't have the funds to do it, they may just turn it over to USDA and let somebody at USDA run this program for them. That's just a guess. I have no idea as to what's going to happen. It does change interstate commerce. Previously, prior to whatever the effective date of this farm bill was, it was illegal to transport hemp or hemp products or hemp derivatives across state lines. That is no longer the case. Hemp can be transported throughout any state necessary. States can still ban hemp, but they cannot ban the transportation of hemp through their state or any hemp products through their state. So we go back to my Kentucky example. I asked the simple question, knowing it was illegal prior to the Farm Bill, how they were doing this. They loaded the trucks up at night, and they transported everything at night and never hauled it during the day. Basically, as I pointed out, so we're transporting a drug, basically, that we shouldn't be. So there were problems with the old system, and we recognize it. Probably in your and, you were going to say hemp.
Yeah, there we are.
It is now added to the insurable crops list. It's added in like tobacco, potatoes, or any of those crops where you'd have to think about the storage of the crop and potential other issues that would arise after harvesting with some of those crops. So it will be a similar product if you've done tobacco or potato insurance. Potentially, RMA has the authority to begin looking at developing pilot programs, probably looking at Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Colorado, Oregon, other states where they've had a little bit more history of production since the last Farm Bill under the research title, to figure out how they're going to develop national products for this and make it available to all growers across the country. So we're going to have to wait and see how that comes out and what type of revenue or yield insurance will be available on those products. I was on a phone call earlier in the week, and the thought was you potentially would be able to insure this at some point under whole farm revenue as well. It would just be something you just add in under the whole farm revenue protection, if that's something you're looking at. And then the last thing is just kind of research dollars. Prior to this Farm Bill, there were limited opportunities to use USDA research dollars, which would mean we would be able to provide growers with seed, varieties, sort of traits, growing practices that would work so they would know how to do this in respective states. That's been lifted with this, and this is now available for research dollars. And people, plant breeders and other things at land-grant universities and other universities can start looking at this to kind of figure out how do we need to develop this and start developing hemp strains that work in the U.S. and consistently produce under the THC level and can sort of meet some of the legal requirements we're going to be dealing with down the road. So my wrap-up's pretty simple. It is still illegal to grow hemp in any state unless it's a part of a research program. We sort of have to wait for USDA and the states to come up with some of this, and there's some potential issues that once we get all these growers in the market selling the CBD oil may collapse and prices may drop, and we'll have a lot of growers go out of this. So probably going at it slow for a while is a good thing, that it will help us figure out what the market can actually support down the road as we see more states bring on at least research pilot programs that have been approved and move it forward to where we actually get these state hemp production plans. And then I put both our contact info up there. figure out how to bring the chat box back up so we can figure out if we have any questions.
No questions yet. I've asked if there's any questions, please add them to the chat pod. And there's Paul and Howard's contact information. Really appreciate it, Paul and Howard. Good information. Great overview of the Farm Bill.
I'm going to stop sharing the screen and hand the stuff back to you.
Sounds good.
If I can remember how to do that right.
I got it.
Perfect.
Oops, I made Taylor the...
She has the sponsor slide, so I wanted to make sure that one was up.
Perfect.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording at this point.